Poor Simon.
Oh.
Oh.
Oh,
Patches right over the top there.
I know. I'm trying to get rid of them.
what big patches you have.
So bad.
Shouldn't really be saying this, but if anything, this is more important than private cars, because private cars is happening anyway, and that's going to happen. But there's this huge market and this huge, industry that produces enormous amounts of CO2 and particulates, which is road transport, commercial road transport, and that is being addressed at this show.
Fans.
I can't hear the music. Can anyone else hear it? This is so classic Paul. What?
Nothing's happening. I'm just playing.
It's just playing and there's no music. It's jerky. Fantastic.
Well, that's your
It's
internet, possibly. Your internet.
In answer to your question, Sarah, in the chat box, just because it's funny.
Oh, yeah.
Hello and welcome to the EV Cafe, where the fantastic world of commercial EVs is about to hit you like a van door in a gust of wind. We're here to deliver some high octane, or should I say high voltage, laughs and keep you entertained with a payload of information.
Dear Lord. Does
So
this go on long?
So hop in, buckle up, and let's take this wonderful ride together.
Oh, wow.
Cringe glands are
We spent weeks on this as well.
No, I'd written my script and I asked AI to put some puns in there. It just went a bit over the top.
AI's never going to catch on if that's the output.
Did you see today's the AI's impression of what the ideal man and woman looks like?
That's it.
I think AI is a dangerous game, Johnny. Step away.
Yeah, I think I will listen now. But before we do get on with the show and hit the road, let's give a standing ovation to our goal partners. They're experts in laying concrete that's greener than a garden full of spinach. Chris will like that one. And installing EV charging infrastructure that charge up your van during dwell times using renewable energy. And when it comes down to breakdown assistance, they'll have your back and they'll have you back on the road, or you can shout, Paul Kirby loves vans. They are the AA, My Energy, Geotab, Churchill, EV Civils, and Plug Me In. Thank you for your support. Now it's time to introduce our incredible EV Cafe team. I'll start with you, Paul, where you're usually holding a selfie stick and recording yourself for Only Vans.
Indeed. Well, so as you know, I'm Paul Kirby. I'm the Electric Van Man, and I'm here at the AFP conference, which is going very well. And there's some, of course, conversation about vans. Very exciting. Excellent
stuff. And it's time to introduce the rest of the team. So, Sam, it's great to have you here and on time. You have.
That's the best one yet.
That was good. That was the best joke yet.
Yeah, you didn't get the memo about the shirt, but we'll let that one slide. You have first-hand experience operating an e-van fleet, eh? And I would say that your insights are probably more valuable than Paul's, would you say?
Well, yeah, you kind of took the words out of my mouth, really, to be honest. But yeah, so Chief Vehicle Officer by day at Gridser, but formerly ran my own fully electric logistics fleet for 10 years. So yeah, I had the largest fleet in the country with the largest infrastructure. So I suppose when it comes to van expertise, there is no one better than me, really.
I'm sure
here we go.
Yeah, when was that as well? Who knows?
4 minutes in. 4 minutes in.
You teed me up. I had to do it.
Yeah.
JC, you understand the significance of establishing reliable charging points and collaborating with governments to ensure commercial vehicles are efficiently refueled and not of the wet kind. And also tell the audience how they might be able to win one of these today.
Well, thank you for that lovely introduction, my dear chap. And yes, I may know a little bit about charging, but anyway, that was back in the day when chargers were 3 kilowatts and cost about £50 million. These days, we have real experts like Paul and Sam and Sarah and you, Johnny. I'm just here for the laughs. and the mugs. So the mail room is where I hang out. So at the bottom of the screen, you will find a little box called Q&A. If you have a question for our panelists, fire onto that Q&A button, put your question in there. I'll do my very best to get to your question and ask it direct to the guests, and the one who gives us the best question, you know the form, can win one of these bad boys. So if you've got chat that you want to do, which is just general van chat, people chat, whatever chat, mental health support chat, stick it in the chat box. If you've got something pithy and difficult to ask, especially Paul, then stick it in the Q&A box. Love you. Moving on. Let's go to Sarah.
Do I get a nice intro, Johnny, or have I got to make my own?
I haven't got anything planned, but I was just going to say a lovely anchor lady, and that
It's
we're
not that bad.
surely. Yeah, you're no stranger to the EV world, are you, Sarah?
No.
Commercial vans.
Yeah, actually, I really was looking forward to today because I don't really know much about vans, as proven yesterday on a webinar where I stupidly agreed to stand in for Paul, and then they asked me questions specifically about vans. So today I'm here to learn. But yes, I'm Sarah Sloman, and in my day job, I'm Chief Strategy Officer at fintech company PayThrough, and we do the apps and payments that power the EV chargers. So yeah,
Sarah,
here with my little notepad. What?
you may not know much about trucks, but am I right in thinking you've danced in the back, sorry, vans, but you've danced in the back of a truck?
Yeah, which is no mean feat considering how massive it was, and I can't dance. So that was two new wonderful experiences for me. I've obviously worked with fleets, that's how I'm here today. But as I say, the ins and outs of the vehicles themselves, I'm yet to explore.
With your panel discussions, and Sarah, we're hearing a lot of fun news stories at the moment about electric cars, such as bridges collapsing and car parks falling down.
I know.
I don't really hear much about in the way of electric vans.
I'm finding the car park discussion very interesting because I'm absolutely convinced it's really merely just the age of them. Considering the Tesla's 2.4 tons and most SUVs are equal weight, I don't see why it's suddenly become the problem of the electric vehicle to blame for the collapse of these car parks. And some of our partners at PayThrough operate huge car parks, and they're under really strict and stringent surveys and making sure that there's safety alignment at all times. I really struggle to believe those stories. The FUD on the vans, though, yesterday on the webinar with Fleet News was very much about, are the ranges really there? And a fantastic panelist from Scottish Water was saying, well, if you're only doing 100 or 110 miles, then yeah, absolutely, you might as well take the plunge. And using data telematics to find out which vehicles you can switch to first is really a no-brainer. So yeah, as always with FUD, fear, uncertainty and doubt, it can only take a little pipette of worry to turn into a flood of tears. So I think we need to be a bit more careful with the stuff we're planning about.
Very poetic.
That was
done,
slick.
Sarah.
And perhaps I'm feeling
A
poetic
pipette of
today.
worry.
Perhaps it's not coffee.
But Paul, what's the average journey cycle for a van? I mean, we know that an electric car, 17 miles a day on average. It's not huge. What about vans?
So for vehicles under 3 years old, the DFT reports that the average van journey per annum is 17,500 miles a year. And I think that's approximately, from the last time I did it, 67 miles a day on a 5-day week. So give or take, it's not a lot. But there are exceptions, of course. And in the world of vans, the bigger the fleet, the more uniform the way those vehicles get used typically. But in the smaller fleets, they are pushed and pulled depending on the demand, and it could be across the country. So there are definitely challenges with this. But what's also interesting is that the 3 years to 10-year-old vans, the journeys are about half, according to the DFT, in that sector. So the mileage is much less because the vehicles are used locally. So mileage shouldn't be a challenge either in the first or the second market for a significant proportion of the vehicles out there.
So
But
is it wise to sort of pick off the low-hanging fruit then in commercial vehicles?
Well,
like we did with
exactly what
cars?
Sarah said. Yeah, exactly what Sarah
Yeah.
said. Using that data to get a good handle on the vehicles that are easiest to move to electric because of the journeys. But you don't want super low, because then you don't get the saving associated with maintenance and mileage. So there is an optimum, and the optimum is probably, you know, around that 80 miles a day or something like that, 80 to 100 miles a day, and the ability to charge overnight at a depot or at home or wherever it is. But yeah, so those are the things. But I will just say one thing. I don't know. Will we touch on the awareness of this week at some other point, or is it a good point to talk about that now?
Always
Do
a
it.
good point. Always a good time.
Well, because this week you might not have been aware, and I think you'd be forgiven for not being aware, because there hasn't been as much as usual posted around Mental Health Awareness Week. So John and I were involved in a phenomenal podcast this week. A guy called David Beanie, and he used to work for Auto Trader, a well-known large automotive company, but he was a commercial director there and jumped out to become a mental health awareness expert, creating kinder cultures, but all because he had panic attacks. And it was a phenomenal experience. Both, I mean, we literally immersed ourselves in that chat, didn't we, John? Got some live help.
It was free. What could I do? I had to offload.
Absolutely take advantage. But it was incredible to go on the journey of exploring what challenges we can experience within our own minds as we carry out our day jobs, the things that we mask, hide away, and we all do it from time to time and moment by moment. But you know, when it becomes a habit and when it becomes something that cloaks out the rest of our lives, it was a really good opportunity to talk about taking the mask off and being aware of our mental health. Now, the word mental health has some connotations, doesn't it, that are negative. But so you want to call it mental wellness, mental fitness, some people are talking about. But either way, focus on the health of your mind as well as the health of your body. And that's all we're going to say about that. And you can check out the podcast between both myself, John, and David Beanie, but there was also another one with, both the one with Craig Hibbert and also the one with Lee Sibley, all have a theme around mental health, that people still excelling in business can have challenges. So it's okay to not be okay.
Good man.
Very much for raising that, Paul. Very, very important week. I think it's safe to say that we as the EV Cafe are all here for anybody that needs a chat as well, inside the EV Cafe and outside. So thanks for that, Paul. We'll come back to the discussions around the challenges facing commercial vehicle operators in the EV space in just a moment. But for now, it's time to hear from Sarah, live from the studio on the positive news.
Whoop, whoop.
I remembered to turn my camera off before I got changed this time. That's still definitely the worst episode ever. Thank you. And the Mental Health Awareness Week does come up in the news. Hello and welcome to the EV Cafe News. I'm Sarah Sloman. It's lunchtime and I'm actually at home for once. Not bad considering it's event silly season. And as ever, this is the positive news. And because this is a Vans special with our EV Cafe Mental Health First Aider on hand, our beloved Paul Kirby, aka Van Geek, the very one, I have found myself reflective and grateful for the next 3 news items across our industry this month. Firstly, what a time that we've had at the ITT Hub, where we saw the launch of the EV Cafe Village with over 20 guests interviewed. Actually, make that 21 if you include a very special minister who is the best minister I've met and yet still couldn't make eye contact with me. It was like, look into my eyes, into the eyes, not around the eyes, and you're under. But then Paul Kirby walked up. So when faced with a choice of staring into Paul's eyes or mine, who can blame him with that Kirby charm? I am still annoyed. Anyway, the point is our most heartfelt and special thanks to those who made that show happen. Those who went above and beyond, didn't falter even once, and were not just still standing, but still smiling at the end. And that is Leah and Alan from the Ground Transport Group. And of course, Caroline and Helen, our EV Cafe business support team. So huge, huge thanks to you and everyone who came to support the EV Cafe Village. The ITT Hub was the place to be for what I would say one-to-one in-depth conversations, and to see those sponsored pods taking shape was really superb in the village space. So shout out to Katja, Shell, 3TI, Grays EV, Plug Me In by Callison, the AA Business Services and Interval Recruitment. All together they made the ITT Hub one to remember, and all caught on camera by Generate Media. Fully charged north on Friday. Will we see you there? Put that in the chat, please. Like to see you. Secondly, let's show our support for the wonderful AFP, the Association of Fleet Professionals, who are stuck with Paul Kirby today. They have their annual conference, and time again, the AFP is cited as a central place to learn, share and disseminate fleet information amongst peers. And as it's not for profit organisation, I would recommend that you check them out. But lastly, something very special happened yesterday. The superb team at Mercedes-Benz Trucks UK, who threw out our superb EV Cafe friend Jamie Fretwell, ensured that I had a place at the table for the launch of Women in Automotive. There was 40 people there in the room and an equal number online across the automotive organisations who were united by this movement. And as part of Mental Health Awareness Week, I was grateful to give my experience of the work-life balance, whatever that is, and how to find time for yourself, stay focused on your goals, whatever they may be. And I cited you guys, the EV Cafe, and how this community of everyone watching and tuning in of like-minded professionals really manages to honour this friends first principle. And as Jolly said, reach out anytime. And time again, through the rough and the smooth, I mentioned things like the Barbara Cox Woman of the Year Award, and how here on the EV Cafe, we plan to work with Women in Automotive to launch the application process to seek that candidate, make use of my prize money, and equip them with the skills to enter on industry. So as ever, please keep talking and sharing and tuning into us, because it's hashtag friends first, colleagues second, collaboration, information dissemination, lots of other things, including this is just fun. And now we've made Sam wince. It's back to the studio. Bye.
Good work. Good job.
Brilliant, as always.
Back to the topic then.
Yes, more than both.
I'll start with you, Paul. In your experience with talking to lots of different fleets, all shapes and sizes, what are you hearing as the biggest challenges when it comes to electrifying the vans?
Well, Johnny, if you didn't mind, I was going to kind of give an overview of the market a little bit on very quickly, 4 areas where I think it's really, really important. New vans, new ecosystem, new horizons, but also the challenges, the new challenges that we're facing as fleet. And so when you look at the van market in the snapshot of this year, the van market as a whole is up 14.68%, 14.6%. If you look at the electric van market, it's up 14.8%. So in other words, just a 2.2%, 0.2% uplift on that market share. And actually, when you compare the market share last year to this year, it is both 5.4%. So you would be forgiven for thinking that electric vans are stalling, and you could be right. But the reality is there are a lot of new vans on the market, and we've seen a new launch of a mid-size van by Maxus, an ED7, looks like a really credible van. We've also got Ford coming with 3 vans. So they've got the Ford E-Transit, which is here, the Custom, which is coming out, and it will probably be available late this year, early next year, and then the Courier as well. Surely electric van can't stall. Yes, right.
I was going to say that out loud as well.
I was going to say that.
Well done, Tim. That was good. Sorry, Sam.
But Ford are getting there, right? Getting some vehicles on the market. They're a bit slow, but you could argue that there's not a lot of people giving them a race. Stellantis have got a good, steady product. Merc upgrades are coming next year on the Sprinter, the large van, and they are very committed. We just heard from Mercedes yesterday on a public sort of webinar, if you like, that they are fully committed to the EV architecture and thinking about the large van in particular and dedicated to that. And the Vito has always been not a bad electric van, and particularly when they sort of gave it a bit of extra mileage. So there is plenty of choice. But there's also some good vans coming. Obviously, the ID Buzz Cargo is out, but there's also a good future, even for British-built vans. There's a Watt electric vehicle coming out 2025, already in testing, already getting some kilometers under its belt and some miles under its belt. So it's a fantastic time for electric vans coming to market. But there is a new ecosystem as well forming either side of the established van market, really. So there's some smaller vehicles. Sam loves them, but there are some small vehicles, mainly coming from China, but having some English interpretation put on them by MEV. MEV have brought out a range of small vehicles that are already doing a good job in airports and colleges and schools and hospitals around the country. And so they're beginning to form a smaller end of the market. And we're also seeing some of the larger electric vans, small electric trucks, kind of creating a satellite kind of hub and spoke kind of environment. So there is a changing ecosystem, and of course, when you put in charging into that, it makes the world of operating vans a more difficult place. We heard about that this morning here at the AFP conference. So we're, firsthand fleet managers are talking about the challenge of charging and payments, and Sarah knows all about the issues around payment in the public space, but also payment. We heard from Mina how they can manage the energy costs and all that sort of stuff for home and drivers. And then we've also got to bear in mind that routing and efficiency, we were talking earlier about mileage, right? That routing and efficiency is going to play a big part in this electrification, because the Johnny, I think you're famous for saying this, that the most carbon-free mile is the mile you don't do, in that sense. So, don't travel if you don't have to. Of course, vans are there for productivity, and that's what they're there for. But it points to a new horizon, right? A horizon which is a blank canvas, a canvas that we can redesign the transport of the future. And with the mind that this ecosystem is changing in terms of the vehicles available. So we've got the mainstream vehicles, but we've also got the smaller and the larger vehicles kind of beginning to work together in a more coordinated way. And making a difference. We've also got, and we heard again this morning, the Chinese vehicles on the horizon. So there are a number of manufacturers, and when you lump those manufacturers in together, the Chinese manufacturers are producing something like 12 million, 13 million vehicles a year. I mean, they are massive numbers, and the publicly owned ones like BYD are some of the biggest manufacturers in the world, including all of the mainstream OEMs. So China is on the verge of bringing a lot of vehicles in. We've seen it with SAIC and Maxus, but Geely, the parent company, and Dongfeng are also beginning to target Europe and the UK. But we've also got to think, well, we're going to have one eye on autonomy, which is beginning just in trial terms and all that sort of stuff, which really lends itself well to the commercial vehicle market, possibly the heavier end, but certainly there will be options there. But ultimately, we've got those challenges, Johnny, you mentioned that. The challenges of power, power in the right place, getting power independence. We're going to have to consider things like solar and renewable power, where we can bring it under our own control day and night. But also then the charging, the actual charging itself, and getting some better clarity to extend the range of vehicles and increasing the speed. The ID Buzz is a great example of that. You can charge that vehicle up really, really quickly, on the verge of the Tesla type charging territory, which does make a difference. And then ultimately, we've got to look after our drivers, both from a mental well-being point of view, which goes without saying, but also to help them engage with this transition. We can't, every person like us that takes a company car, we get a check for 3,000 quid, and it's not quite like that. It's the benefit in kind we get back. You don't get that for a van driver. They're not invested in the same way. So we've got to look after our van drivers. So in summary, we've got, new vans, new ecosystem, new horizons, and new challenges. And all of those things, we need to get the knowledge in and then disseminate that knowledge out, which is what we're doing today. And I'm thrilled that we've got Simon and Chris, who are going to be joining us, bringing their real world experiences today, particularly Simon from a vehicle point of view, but then Chris also kind of the ecosystem of electric and decarbonization within the difficult end of transport. So that's my little summary, if you like. Any questions?
Oh,
It's
yes.
question time.
Oh, yes.
John's
I
got his hand up.
have. Now then, we've talked about this long and hard, that, congestion is one of the major issues for our roads. And many years ago, when I was doing strategy for the government, we talked about aggregation of loads. So big trucks going into distribution centres to offload to go on to medium-sized and smaller vehicles for delivery, and then last mile delivery, and those light powered vehicles that you spoke of. I'm not aware of that happening really anywhere practically where you've got this distribution network, which is taking vehicles off the road because you aggregate those loads, and you might have Amazon Next and various other retailers all using the same vehicle because they're going to the same place. Is that likely to ever be a thing?
I know Sam and I we differ on an opinion here, and Sam's got more experience, albeit historic, than me in this space.
Very,
But
very
what-
historic.
very historic, long time ago.
Still more though.
Yes, absolutely. I'm not going to dispute that. But what I expect is that people will be looking to consolidate, and this will become more of a thing in time. I think we're right at that blank canvas moment, and we've got the opportunity to do things differently than we've done before. And it'll take some brave people. EAV is a great option in terms of a cargo bike. It's new. I know it gets up Sam's nose, which is really why I'm saying it. But also there's companies like Zedify and that are exploring different ways. And somebody's going to stumble across a good idea. But I think the collaboration word is a very difficult one. And I wonder how long it will take to fully grasp that. So, I do have some sympathy with Sam's view.
No, yeah, and Paul, I agree with you. I mean, collaboration is a word you use then, which is interesting. I remember a presentation from one of the largest logistics companies in the world who presented in London about 5 or 6 years ago, and they kept saying hashtag collaboration in they focused on every single slide, and they did none of it because all they ever did was look after number one. They didn't consolidate with anybody. So, my old business, John, was effectively consolidating multiple retailers and logistics companies together with reasonable success in London. But again, it wasn't something that was particularly easy to do because people don't necessarily want to play in the same sandpit. So, consolidation sounds great, but and obviously creates huge economies of scale as well. But politically and commercially, it's very difficult to find ways unless the sort of carrot and stick is a bigger stick and it's enforced in some way. And that was something we looked at in London with Transport for London back in the day around potentially enforcing in such a way that you had pockets of London, which was you had to go through certain consolidation, which I think they do in the building trade, not on EVs, but they do in the building trade a lot, I think. So there might be a little bit more stick required in order to enforce some sort of consolidation, which ultimately, to Paul's not flippant, but jovial point around vehicles, I think they need to get bigger, not smaller. They need to be bigger vehicles, but less of them and more consolidated loads so that you've got multiple drops being achieved for various different types of parcel and package, but only do the drop once. And for that, you need a larger cube, you need larger vehicles, but just less of them on the road, but they need to be bigger, not smaller.
Yeah, and I kind of see that point, but I think the mix will change. We'll have some smaller. The post office for years have been trying to use the Peugeot Bipper or whatever, the really small vehicles to do a lot of their local deliveries. I think those will go to that smaller kind of vehicle, and then I agree, we could end up with some bigger vehicles with consolidated loads.
Well, even the Royal Mail is a good example because their freight profile has dramatically changed. People don't write letters and send bits of paper anymore, so the freight profile is increased all over time. So things are coming shoebox, not thin bits of paper and magazines. So as the freight profile only has to go up incrementally by a few percent, and all of a sudden your cube is 100-fold bigger or 10-fold bigger or whatever. So yeah, and it's a challenge across all industries of all different types.
Yeah, I think parcels are not the only opportunity. I mean, when you look at some of the biggest, we've got facilities management and British Gas Utilities, some of the biggest people that are electrifying their fleet and with some degree of success. We know about the DPDs and others, Amazon and so on, but there are other big fleet users that are looking at this in detail and making those changes with engineers, with different kinds of use case, which is good news.
Yeah, can I just make a quick point on Paul's sort of synopsis as well? I mean, we jest a lot, but Paul's knowledge of this area far exceeds mine in reality. Because you've got a much broader, wider range of all the different types of vehicle and all the different companies that do that. So it's really interesting for me to learn from you in terms of you explaining that. What I will say though, which occurred to me, I think it was Sarah said flippantly in the introduction, yeah, how long ago was that when I ran a logistics company? And you're quite right, that was back in 2009 and 10 years thereafter. So it was a long time ago. But actually an awful lot of what we're discussing today, nothing has changed. Nothing. The vehicles are what you described is a tremendous level of additional opportunity that didn't exist in 2009 when I started. But the principles are exactly the same. What distances do you need to travel? What power do you need? How do you charge them? What's the most commercially viable way of doing it? What's on the market that's available? And how do you put it all together to make a zero emission solution? Nothing has changed. All that's happened in time is that technology has improved and the knowledge base and understanding of how to deliver it has improved dramatically. So my sort of thought process on what you said, Paul, is it's all great. What you've just highlighted is opportunity galore, and there's loads of people that have been there and done it as well that we can learn from. So there's nothing left now for people to crack on and get on with it. So rather than continue trying to find weird and wonderful autonomy or induction or all these other weird and wonderful things, let's just crack on with the stuff that we know actually works, and then we might be able to make a difference.
Well said.
Sam, did that hurt?
Faz.
No,
Not
I
being
enjoyed it.
nice
It's
to
fine.
Paul. It must hurt a little bit. I'm lowering my hand strategically there because I always politely put it up, but this time I want to butt in. The only thing that has changed, though, I think, is the consumer. I think it's nuts how much flexibility the consumer has. I've only just become an Amazon member like the last 2 days, and it said to me, "Would you like to consolidate your parcel and just have it all a day later?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'd far rather have less deliveries. It's so annoying." So yeah, I was really pleased to get home. There's like a big pile of them, and it said, "Would you like to reduce the packaging, take it out of its original?" So just had this little bedding arrive as it was. I was really impressed, and I just thought, well, hang on, that's a massive consolidation centre out by the M5 that is now asking me how I would like to have my delivery schedule. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. So yeah, the only thing I'd say that has changed is not the demand, because sort of COVID made everyone just order things, but I think the sort of message is getting through to the consumer now clearly that we need to be more conscious.
Do you know what? It's a great point, Sarah. It's one that Sam said would never happen, and that's the packaging would change. In effect, that we're just getting the packaging in its purest form rather than the big boxes, and that we don't cube out before we weigh out, because maximizing the use of space is really important, because at the moment, that would allow us to get to smaller vehicles, and could change the model of vehicles. But it's great. DPD have also been doing that kind of thing about parcel consolidation and things like that, and offering you times and the ability to time, so they only deliver once. I think that focus from some of these companies is really good and really class leading. Excellent.
Yeah, it's pressure on the retailers is really important, I think, in this it was the thing that they were never in the room in the old days, and I'm not sure they are necessarily too much these days, but I think the consciousness around packaging is so much more important. I mean, when I did have cargo cycles on my fleet, there were days when bubble wrap used to arrive, like massive pieces of bubble wrap that was the size of a small human, and I could only fit one in a cargo cycle, or I could fit 50 or 100 small packages. So I just looked at it and just thought, I'm just losing money because it's cubed out on one parcel, and that's an extreme example. But but again, if we can get the retailers to reduce their packaging, and I think someone said we should be buying less, or buying stuff we don't need, which is Tim Rothwell, good point as well. Or certainly, just if nothing else, have, as Sarah said, the consciousness around the fact, be more, think about the things you're buying. Do I really need it? And what packaging are you delivering it to me in before it actually arrives? That's all hopefully gonna push us in the right direction.
Yeah, it's a
John,
key
did you
point
have
actually from Tim. Consumers need to stop buying stuff we don't need.
No.
And perhaps, Tim, I need to show your comments to my wife. Anyways, we need to part this conversation for the moment. And it's now time to hear from a big fleet on how they are moving to a net zero van operations. It gives me pleasure to welcome our first guest for today, who represents one of our gold sponsors, the AA. And welcome to Simon Unglis. So,
am I doing my intro?
You do your intro while we get Simon on.
Yeah,
Where is he? Is he lost?
Well,
on,
he'll get there in a minute.
Simon!
2 short paragraphs, so I'll get those out of the way and we'll see whether he arrives. Simon Unglis is a highly experienced fleet professional with more than 40 years working in the vehicle supply industry. From joining road transport operations in 1979, I was -2 at that point, Simon has worked in several roles, including commercial vehicle rental, contract hire, finance, logistics, contract management, business development, and account management. In his current role as a commercial fleet manager at the AA, he recently won the Fleet Management Superstar Award at the Great British Fleet Awards. Well done, nice. And is always looking for new opportunities to trial, test, and grow the AA's fleet with relentless drive towards a greener future. So, Simon, I think you'll fit in just fine here, and welcome to our show. Nice to have you.
Hi, thank you. I think somebody said I've got to behave, so I'm not sure I will. Fit in.
No behave. No
Wrong
behaving in
show,
this forum.
wrong
No
show.
behaving.
No. In fact, I've just been warned by my boss. He said, "Go on there and behave." I think, look, thanks for the intro. I mean, I wish somebody had written that in my CV about 2 years ago. I'd have got more money, I guess. Anyway, moving on. So I was just making some notes, funny enough, about where we are at, and while you've all been chatting and I was nearly gone back into the distribution bit actually from my past and was thinking of shared user networks and all sorts. So I sort of get what you mean. I think where we're at is, I'm going to use the word interesting a lot. I love the word, but I think where we're at is an interesting point. So we've got, I think a couple of years ago, we had some new owners, and obviously they've like an ESG message. 97% or 96, 97% of all our emissions come from our road fleet, which is a real challenge. And but they, you know, they want to move to a greener agenda. I came into the business as an old person, and the first thing I sort of said was, "What are you doing about, you know, alternate fuels?" And I'm going to be careful what I say because my esteemed colleague to my left is ready to punch me one, I suspect, if I. He did say something.
hi to Duncan.
No, he's just left. He's left me in embarrassment. No, Doug, our engineer, literally sits to my left as a I think gatekeeper for the business and shut me up. But Doug sort of said something really interesting at the time. Was around we have to think about our minimum vehicle capability. And you know, when we talk about, you know, I wrote down some challenges while you were sort of talking about challenges, and the first thing I wrote was around towing, range, home charging, lack of capability for some people. Cost capability of vehicles. We were one of the manufacturers last night, not going to mention who we were out to dinner with, but one of the big truck manufacturers. And, you know, and the comment to them was, why would I want to pay sort of 3 times the price for 25% of the capability on a truck? And where they all sort of like, oh yeah, get that. Payload, massive issue. So we use the C word a lot, and it is compromise. I'm glad I got that out properly. And that genuinely is a compromise. So if we go back to our very latest acquisition that went on the, how long have I got, by the way? Like 2 days, because I'll just chat.
As long as you want.
Yeah,
this is
just
great.
no,
No,
we'll
5
stop you.
minutes.
We want to ask a couple of questions before you
Okay.
finish, but yeah.
All right, okay. So I'll just
Keep going.
quickly. So the last E-Transit, I bought it. Said to Doug, we're going to get this out. It's going to be at the CV show, and he said, "Can we get all the gear on there?" Well, we got it all on there. Luckily, the driver is genuinely 75 kilos. Otherwise, we were going to be a struggle. And I think when we buy these things, that we don't, you know, that we're doing it for the right reasons, but we still have to be operational. You know, the business has to make money. We have to serve our members and our customers. So I think for me, that was a stroke of genius by Doug to get it finished how we did, and it looked fantastic. And I think that is and if I'm really honest, I guess is the really first full operational. Right, take it from CV show and straight in operation. You know, we give them a card. We're now sorting out his home charger and stuff. So what have we got coming? I mean, we've currently got around about 12 Toyota Pro ACs, a couple of little smaller ones, City E's that we're using to recalls fleets. And we're generally working on what we call our more commercial fleet. So if you think of our roadside fleet as probably a bit ring fenced at the moment, is we can't really do it as full capability. But some of our other operations we can, as I said, like gear assist. And we're now looking at what we're doing with fuel assistance and other things. We're launching a couple of EVs with EV charging. So for direct EV charging for cars on EVs, which are genuinely really exciting. So it's again, you know, engineering wise, it's a bit of a challenge. But we're working on that. So, and they'll they will have level 1 capability for some breakdowns. So these guys can do base up. Obviously, if they can't fix, they can't tow. So that's one of our problems, is that, you know, if the experience to the customer is that we'll send an EV out, we can't fix it, but we'll have to wait for a truck. So you know, and they're the sort of things that will be addressed next year. I think Paul mentioned that we're going to have or Ford bring out the Custom. They've promised towing capability of around about 2.1 tons and a range of 200-ish miles. We suspect that it won't have both. So if we put 2.1 ton on the back, you know, we might be able to get to the services. And if Ford are listening, apologies, but look, we've got to be realistic. I think even my boss said if you put a beacon on, that'll be 10% gone. But so this is where, you know, we use the other word we use a lot as learning. We're learning. I think somebody said we've got to get past this learning phase. I think that's all we do. So we're doing all this stuff to learn where we're going. So we will order some when they're available, and we will put them on the road. And that will be, I guess, a true breakthrough to where we are fully operational with electric breakdown trucks or vans. Sorry, didn't mention trucks. Stop that one. We do have a couple of e-dailies, Paul, on order, vans and a chassis cab. So that, again, there, if you're at the tow show, you might see something there that's new. Sorry if there's any of our competitors.
That sounds kinky, the tow show.
Yeah, that is. Well, yeah, I've not been invited
On that one.
So. I've been not invited back either. We have got an ID buzz coming, which obviously Volkswagen is a big part of the organisation. We'd expect that, and that will be In fact, that'll be on the EV rally if we're allowed to mention that. So
Yeah.
that'll be one of the support vehicles, and that will look pretty sexy, I think. So just going on, I mean, look, we obviously there was you've seen it at all the shows. I think it was right opposite your cafe at the at ITT Hub was the little Nexo hydrogen vehicle. I mean, I think it's our first turn of water towards hydrogen. And I noticed that, one of our partner companies, Rebus, they're testing the MAN. I think it's the first hydrogen one. And again, now I think that's got really exciting for us in the longer term, seeing where we go with that. So we have got, strangely, we have also that was near you at the show, we have a Maxus T90. So that will be, so that's currently being wrapped, and that will be, in fact, I've just been chased for that this morning, but that's going to do our event. So Science guys, so you'll see that. I mean, Paul, you go to all of these, so you'll see it at Ascot, and you'll see it at Wimbledon, and you'll see it at Glastonbury. No doubt you're top of the bill at Glastonbury.
Oh yeah,
Go to all these things.
yeah, absolutely all the time. Like, see it what?
Exactly. I mean, I'd like to be the driver and just get all of these events. But anyway, I would just go back to one of the things you raised. Somebody asked about mileage. I mean, our vehicles generally anywhere between 10 to 40,000 miles a year, depending on where they are. London guys will be a lot less than somebody in the borders. So I think that's another thing that we have to take consideration of. And I know that the easiest thing to say is we'll just go and get the customs, and you put them into London and you'll put them into Manchester, because we need clean air there, obviously, Birmingham and such. One of the first ones, funny enough, is we've got and is a patrol, Hearts and Minds was the other thing. And you've got, so where we've done some patrol roadshows last year, it's got like an age demographic. The older guys, I guess, were less trusting than some of the younger people. So we had younger patrols and that. So we might dot them around the country actually, and not just go for the obvious. So again, just to see how it really pans out. We have done a couple of LEVC plug-in hybrids, and we may well do some of the Fords. We Patrol of the Year drove one at Dundon, and it got really good right up there. So again, not necessarily going straight to full EV straight away, but again, now where we think we may have challenges with charging and networks and stuff, that it's just another way of reducing our emissions really. And I guess that is part to full zero is to try and reduce via other things. So so the last thing was really for me, sorry, I've just running through my notes now. The other biggest challenge is unpredictability or inconsistency of workload.
Have we lost him?
Oh, that makes me sad.
Well, at least the guy's last point across.
Yeah, workload.
Simon can go quicker than the
Simon.
internet can cope with.
What's happened? I don't know what's happened. Anyway,
There was some
we are
brilliant stuff in
running
there.
slightly
Yeah.
behind on schedule, so perhaps we'll
Poor
go
Simon.
revisit them a bit later
Which is-
on.
Yeah.
And I kind of
Oh, no.
request that we save some of our questions and answer the audience questions until after we've heard from our next guest speaker. Simon, if you can hear us, do come back on for questions later on.
Okay.
Over to Sam for the final guest speaker.
All right then. So, certain Mr. Chris Carpenter from EV Civils. Although his title states Head of Future Business Partnerships, this is not his only role. He carries out some of the more mundane onboarding for new clients. He monitors health and safety, as well as manage the company's social media. He also assists Craig on the day-to-day running of the company, and sometimes steer him in the right direction as a voice of reason. So he basically does everything, it seems. A little known fact about him: he is Chris Carpenter by name, and also by trade, he's a joiner.
Oh,
Which is brilliant. And the other thing I discovered, which I haven't got on my notes, but I'm going to say it anyway, is that I asked a question about Chris when I saw him last week about how a certain element of him is 21 inches. That's his neck, by the way. 21 inches.
gee.
Yes, it's quite a large.
So
So
net.
I won't,
Good
I won't
afternoon,
be
everyone.
borrowing a shirt off you anytime soon.
I don't know. How is everyone?
Anyway, welcome, Chris.
Very good, Chris.
Welcome to you.
Okay, so we EV Civils are trying to make a net zero install for the installation of the infrastructure, and just over a couple of years ago we got into the EV space. We've only been doing it 2.5 years, and we were firing away, installing the charging infrastructure. And Craig and I had a conversation. I said, how could we do this better? We're trying to be greener. What looks greener to us? So we were using a diesel excavator, being towed by a diesel van. We were using petrol-powered small plant and tools, and it looked like an impossible task. We saw another excavator manufacturer at the EV show a couple of years ago, and it was the first time I'd seen a small electric excavator, and I got really excited. So we started looking into that, and of the two companies, we've partnered with JCB, and we now have a 1.9 ton electric digger, which, if you are at Fully Charged this weekend, you will see. The problem we had with the digger was towing it to site, because although there's all these wonderful electric vehicles out there, you have a choice. It's either range or power. You don't get both. And then Paul Kirby sent me a text message one day. He was at a show, and Iveco launched the E-Daily. He said, "What do you think of this 3.5 ton towing capacity?" So that's what we've been waiting for. So all the research we've been doing on the vans, I noticed a question from Mike Fisher earlier asking about charging your equipment in the back of the van. Ford do something. I'm not entirely sure what it's called, but the tools that we use, there isn't a van to charge that. The batteries that we use on our Milwaukee MX Fuel tools are 72 volt batteries. So you put that into perspective, your hand drill can be anything up to 24 volt, and they're the big batteries. So we're using 72 volt batteries. So we solved the excavator issue with JCB, our partners JCB and Gun JCB. We then, thanks to Paul and Iveco, solved the towing issue with the E-Daily, which is also going to be at Harrogate with us this weekend. And then we needed to solve the tool issue. Now, there's quite a few manufacturers out there that are selling battery-operated tools, but nothing on a small plant basis. Like everybody calls it a still saw. It's a cut-off saw, a whacker plate, a pneumatic, as John called it earlier, a pneumatic drill, which we call a breaker.
I'm an ignorant pig. What do I know?
Well, so after a good 12 months of looking around and looking at different tools, we got involved with Milwaukee MX Fuel, and their stuff fits the bill perfectly. So as soon as we get our hands on the E-Daily, because they're not coming off the production line yet, I think it's going to be October this year, back end of October we get ours, we can then start to perform an almost net zero install of the charging infrastructure. So that'll be our gang, our 3-man gang, going out in the van with the tools in the back, towing the electric digger to site, carrying out the work. If they're working away, it just means a bit more planning on our part, where our planners then need to figure out where they're going to charge the equipment overnight. That's all it is, really. But the technology is here now, and Craig, rightly or wrongly, a few months ago decided to decarbonize our company. So we scaled all the way back, some would call it commercial hairy-carry, to come forwards as a greener installation company. And that's where we are. So I can see what Simon was saying about the towing capacity being a bit of a headache. That has been a headache for us for some time now, but we seem to be, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train coming the other way, fortunately.
What?
Thank you.
That's just brilliant. Love
Yeah.
it. I'm going to interject here because I'm properly excited, right?
Yeah, so
this
Johnny,
is
good.
like, you've got 2,000 vehicles over here decarbonising, and you've got like a small fleet over here, both tackling real problems, towing, payload, just trying to turn things upside down. And gosh, it's froth. That was me. Frothing.
He's frothing. Froth.
I was just going to say a big thank you to both Simon and Chris for joining this session. But for the last 10 minutes, I'd like for us to focus on answering some of the audience questions. So I can see we've got some there, John.
Yeah.
But we could, if we run out of time, we can always continue during the after-hour session, which starts at 1 p.m. So you don't need to go anywhere. So yeah, I'd like to pass over to you, John. And it also might be worth just mentioning a comment in the chat box from Benoit as well.
Just got it now. So Benoit Laflamme, great guy, somebody that I met at the ITT Hub last week and had a call previously. And he's a transformational leader in commercial vehicle leasing and fleet management. He's looking for a job and he is utterly, utterly brilliant. There are some people in life you just meet and you just think, Do you know what? That guy's got something special. Benoit Laflamme has something special. So in the chat box is his email address, laflamme@outlook.com. Get in touch with Benoit because he really has got brilliant experience. He's a very motivated, enthusiastic human being. I passed on his CV to a few people today. He's utterly stunning. Give him a shout. Now then, let's go to the Q&A box. Andy Page, if electric van weights are equivalent to ICE engine ones, are average payloads affected? Pablo.
Well, I mean, I will defer to Simon after a second because I actually wrote that down as a question because so the payload challenge is certainly a challenge at 3.5 ton. My question to Simon and anybody really, is the payload a challenge at 4.25 ton? Because from all the statistics that we see, if you're operating at 4.25 ton, the stated payloads are higher than the existing 3.5 ton vans and also the smaller vans, the mid-size vans. So the payload shouldn't be an issue if you operate at 4.25 tons. So Simon, what's your experience?
Simon's
Man
on
needs to be
mute.
mute.
Simon's on
Simon's on
mute.
That's a good job with my joke. Okay, so yeah, look, I think one of the things is we've gone for the e-dailies is to go to 4.2 ton and 4.25 ton. The problem we have with the daily and what we can't be our mainline vehicle is too tall at going car parks, so we couldn't respond to all those sort of breakdowns. No, absolutely with you. That there isn't less of a challenge. I mean, you can do that there. I think for me is though that then the price differential is considerable, and without sharing any commercial, as in costs, between like an e-transit and a daily or other 3.5 ton and a 4.2 ton. So absolutely right though. If it is payload driven, and which generally ours isn't, because once we know what our fixed load is, it's not like we're going out to carry it. So, I mean, towing's different because obviously it grows train weights. But generally, like a key assist van, once they've got all the gear on board, they've got all the gear on board. So I think there was surprise on that one was about how close it was to 3.5 ton. So, but
how long before we see a Transit Custom 4.25 ton or any other mid-sized van at 4.25 ton? Nothing to stop them doing that, is there?
No, but I mean, our other, from memory, now we're going to get into legislation, aren't we? But from memory, speed limiters. So I think there's some other considerations that it's not like, obviously our guys don't speed anyway, but but if they're limited to 56,
it's to 56, yeah.
Then there's an operation issue there, I would suspect. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, if there was a suitable vehicle at 4, if there was a suitable vehicle at 3.5 ton. Because of course the Custom is dropping from 340 to 320, although there's not a massive difference because there's some delete options. So I think we lose about 60 kilos or they're predicted about 60 kilos on the diesel version. So what we see on the electric should be interesting as well. But yeah, so
cool.
No.
Thanks, Simon. Back to John.
Paul Barnfather talks about China and why China's rethinking of the van seems to be so much further ahead than ours, and we seem to be stuck. You mentioned, Paul, perhaps Ford have been a little slow in bringing product to market. I know they trial stuff heavily before coming to market. Are China really that far ahead, and should we be looking more and more at that market? I know Sam's experience of China was what drove him to Newt and those vehicles.
I mean, from what we're seeing from China, it's impressive, albeit a very different style. I don't think they've quite got the spec and the internal quality yet of some of the more mainstream manufacturers that we would experience normally here, the German brands and even Ford to some extent. But I think the warning signs are there. If you were a European OEM or an American OEM, you would have serious warning signs. That the Chinese have been doing this for a very long time and have electrified for a very long time, and also produce most of the batteries, which is the interesting element, right?
And the quality's there as well, isn't it? I know,
yeah.
People have been a bit sniffy in the past about China and gone, not sure about the build quality, not sure about the technology. But the reality is, I mean, having driven the Maxtus vans, they're stunningly good.
Yeah. And the latest one is in particular a step forward again. So I mean, the pace that they're coming at that's the scary bit. I think, you know, that we're seeing really good quality vans coming to market, and we will see more and more. Dongfeng, Geely, you know, more from SAIC. You know, it's all gonna come.
Now
We've got a
then,
lot to learn from China anyway, generally, you know, in terms of the wider EV industry. I mean, I don't think we're able to replicate their speed because, you know, they have quite large sticks rather than carrots over there. But nevertheless, you know, their progression is phenomenal, and we can certainly we should be learning from what they're doing over there and seeing what we can implement. You know, we often say it was tout records about that we got the largest or the biggest, well, outside of China, you know, because there's almost a caveat that there's probably something bigger there already. So yeah, there's a lot to learn, I think.
Well, it's interesting. There's 12 major manufacturers in China, the big ones that account for these 13 million vehicles. 9 of them are state-owned. So they are dictating the direction, and of course, then the rest. They produce 15.4% of the world's vehicles. You know, so it's quite phenomenal. There we go.
I wonder if we might just fire in Bob Murphy's question. Bob, old colleague from Swarco, and talks about given the increasing number of electric vans in urban environments, what are your thoughts on deployment of commercial-only charging hubs in towns and on the outskirts? Sam, clearly our charging guru, what do you reckon?
It's a good question, and the second half was locally. He's noticed large DPD vans taking over. You just pressed answered and disappeared as I was reading it.
I did, but yes,
hogging public charges overnight and causing an obstruction as it's too big for the bay. So I think he said commercial only charging hubs. This is a whole nother debate. I mean, today's only vans. I think we probably need another session in its entirety on charging infrastructure for commercial vehicles. We're certainly not going to cover it in the next 3 minutes, but yeah, he said charging hubs in town or outskirts. Definitely not in town. Definitely not in town. That's not where charging should happen. The charging should happen on the outskirts, where it's accessible and where we can control it and where it's more manageable, and probably a lot more cost effective to put chargers and power in the ground. It's inherently incredibly expensive to try and build these things in the middle of towns. So yes, I think we do need a dedicated network for things like that, but not in towns. I think on the outskirts is where it needs to be.
Understood. Thank you. And one very quick question from Keith Woodcock. He says, for Simon, would you consider electric trucks with hydrogen additions such as the Teva as recovery vehicles?
Absolutely. There you go.
There's no issue.
I
is
love
there?
that. Good.
Hydrogen
No,
turns into electric.
Look, I mean, we were talking with multiple manufacturers around electric with hydrogen range extending facilities, and including some more what you'd call more sort of legacy type manufacturers as well. So absolutely.
Yeah, I think
it's a no-brainer.
It's a really important point, isn't it? That people get really hung up about whether it's a pure EV or it's a hydrogen fuel cell or whatever. They're all zero emission vehicles. This is the point, and we all need to get on board with the emerging technologies, the new technology that is there to clean up our air and to make better use of the vehicles that we've got. It's not difficult.
And it's got to be commercially viable, though, John.
Well, of
Always
course,
has to be
Sam.
commercially viable as well.
Bottom line,
rather narrows the field.
Does it do the job, and can you do it cost effectively? Very, very
Correct.
simple. I agree with you entirely. JB, 2 minutes to go.
I've just sent a note to our LinkedIn page to say that we are moving to the after-hours session. So if they want to continue with the discussions, they will need to go to our Zoom link, and I'll provide them with the Zoom link. So
Good man.
Very good.
So yeah, so I guess we'll sort of say our final goodbyes to those social channels and close the session for today and move over, and I will stop the recording as well.
Recording stopped.
I wish they'd change that. Why